Paul Rappley, and I want to share an experience with you. Maybe you can learn from it. It's been a long time in the making, finishing up settling an estate and taking care of some things for a surviving wife. Her husband died. Must have been about 2 years ago. It was about 2 years ago, and he had two children of his own, two daughters, and he passed away. So 2 years ago, his surviving wife calls and says, I guess I need to get my husband's estate settled. And she said, my accountant suggested that I call you. And so I want to go ahead and get things done and kind of get things put into my name. So we talked a little bit on the telephone about the prior estate planning that they had done. She said he had a will, and she said he left everything to her. So a lot of people say that, and a lot of people mistakenly say that. So when she came in and when she brought his will, well, technically he didn't leave everything to her. He left her, a Louisiana-only form of ownership called Usufruct, which is really common. So his will left his wife the usufruct of his estate, and whenever someone leaves a spouse or someone usufruct, they also name what's called naked owners. Who gets the stuff after the surviving wife dies? Naturally, he named his two daughters as the naked owners. So fine and dandy, but when she came in by herself to talk about, getting the house and getting the cars and getting the stock put into her name so she'd have access to those things, she said she wanted to move. Well, I had to tell her, we're going to have to get your two stepdaughters involved in the settling of his estate, because while they don't get anything now, they are inheriting the right to receive their father's assets when you pass away. We need to get them involved. They need to sign off on the paperwork acknowledging that they are heirs. She said, that should be okay. I have a pretty good relationship with them. So we got in touch with the daughters. We're settling your father's estate. Here's his will. He left his wife, the usufruct of everything, named the daughters as the naked owners. Well, about that time, that's when the two sons-in-law felt compelled to get involved, kind of rear their ugly head and show their muscle. So those four people, the two daughters and their husbands, really started getting a little unreasonably demanding. They started asking for accountings, and they wanted to see all the statements from all the bank accounts and the investments and the IRAs and the annuities and the savings bonds and the CDs. And so we had to go through a process that took well over a year, and just a lot of trouble to satisfy everybody that was involved, mainly the daughters and their husbands, so that everything was documented correctly, so that those daughters and potentially sons-in-laws, their future inheritance was protected. That's what they wanted. So a lot of stuff, a lot of paperwork, a lot of court pleadings, a lot of accounting, a lot of documentation, lots of back and forth, some harmed relationships. 2 years later now, all of the court orders have been signed. No more hearings, no more accountings. Everything has been signed off on, and now things have been taken out of the husband's name and titled correctly so that the wife continues to own her half of their community property, and his half of what was their community property is titled in a way that she has the usufruct, and then ultimately when she dies, those assets will belong to the two daughters of the husband. So that surviving wife doesn't feel real good right about now, because she just went through a difficult process. Not only did she lose her husband, but she had to go through some somewhat adversarial things with her two daughters who she was fond of when all of this started. So now she's looking to me, Paul, what can I do? I live here in Louisiana. I realize our rules are different. I don't know much about it, but I need to make this much easier for my three children when I pass away. So ultimately, we put things in motion, set things up, titled things correctly. Certain things are going to be put into a trust so that they don't have to go through the court process when she dies, and things will go immediately to her children, and those things that need to go back to her husband's children all will happen immediately without, you know, years of court proceedings and everything that goes along with that. So be aware that that's kind of a common scenario in Louisiana, whether the children are from the same marriage or whether there's a blended family situation where you have children from previous marriages. Things can get really testy when the first spouse dies, because oftentimes those children, you know, they want to protect what is their future inheritance. And so anytime any of that needs to be supervised by judges and court processes, it just adds extra layers of complexity. So anything that you can do to get around that often makes things much better for the family and keeps those relationships, you know, really strong. So if you'd like to have a conversation about that, that's what I've done for 25 years. I wrote a book on it. I'll give you a copy. You know, my book, Estate Planning in Louisiana, right there over my right shoulder. A lot of clients tell us that it really helps them prepare to have a really productive conversation about how they want to set up an estate legal program for their family. I'm Paul Rabley. Have a super day.